The notification came at 11:12 p.m. while I was in a hotel room in Portland, still wearing the conference badge around my neck because I hadn't bothered to take it off yet. The room smelled like carpet cleaner and burned coffee. I was halfway through reviewing tomorrow's panel notes when my phone lit up with an unknown number. No text, just a video file. For a moment, I assumed it was spam or a misfire from someone at the event. I almost deleted it. What stopped me was the file name, just a string of numbers that looked like a timestamp. I opened it. The camera angle was high and wide. Familiar. Too familiar. It took my brain about 2 seconds to place it. The upper corner of our bedroom, near the smoke detector. Part of the smart home system I installed myself 3 years ago. Then Lily walked into frame. Barefoot, wearing the gray shirt she slept in when I was home. She wasn't alone. I didn't feel the shock people describe. No heat, no rush. Just a quiet internal click, like a door closing somewhere deep in the building. By second 5, the situation was clear enough that context didn't matter anymore. I checked the progress bar. Didn't finish it. I had already seen what the rest would confirm. A minute later, another message arrived from the same number. Thought you should see who keeps her busy. I set the phone down on the desk and looked at the hotel curtains, still slightly open to the freeway lights. My reflection in the window looked unchanged. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled, conference wristband still on. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I didn't rewind. I just turned the badge face down and started thinking in timelines instead of feelings. Up until that night, my life had the kind of ordinary structure that makes you believe nothing truly bad can fit inside it. 8 years of marriage. A mortgage we refinanced at the right time. 2 cars paid down enough to feel like progress. A shared calendar that stayed mostly clean except for trips, birthdays, and the occasional dinner with friends we both liked just enough to keep. I'm a financial litigation attorney. My days are built around disputes that start small and end expensive. I spend hours reading transactions, statements, emails, and timelines that people swear mean nothing until they mean everything. I argue in conference rooms with men who think volume equals truth. I cross-examine professionals who try to outrun their own records. I'm paid, in a very literal way, to notice what doesn't match. At home, I didn't apply that skill. Not really. Lily worked in accounts for a medical company. On paper, her job was predictable: vendor payments, reconciliations, reporting. In reality, it was constant pressure, deadlines that didn't care about weekends, compliance checks that came without warning, and managers who treated urgent like a personality trait. We both had careers where someone could call at 8 p.m. and legitimately ruin your evening. So when her hours stretched and her answers shortened, it didn't register as danger. It registered as adulthood. The changes didn't show up as a single event. They showed up as adjustments, little shifts in routine that made sense if you wanted them to. Lily started going to the gym later, after dinner, instead of before work. She stopped leaving her phone face up on the counter and started keeping it in her back pocket, screen down. She replaced her old charger with a new one and kept it in her purse, like her battery had become a private concern. Sometimes she'd step onto the balcony to take a call, even in winter, pulling her sweater tight and turning her shoulder away from me. When I'd ask who it was, she'd answer without looking up. Work. Or Jessica. Or one of the girls. The tone was casual, but the distance wasn't. There were also new habits that should have felt louder. A new perfume, subtle, expensive, not the kind she used to buy. A different way of dressing for quick errands, as if the grocery store had a dress code. A sudden interest in skincare routines that required the bathroom door to be closed for an hour. She started sleeping on the edge of the bed more often, or falling asleep with her back turned, claiming she was overstimulated and needed space. I told myself it was stress. Her company had been reorganizing. My own caseload was heavy. We were both tired. That explanation was clean and comforting, and clean explanations are seductive. If I'm honest, part of me enjoyed the ease of trusting. Trust meant I didn't have to dig. Digging meant I might find something. Finding something meant I'd have to change my life. There were minor financial oddities, too. Charges that didn't align perfectly with the story of our week. A dinner tab on a night she said she grabbed something quick at the office. A rideshare charge that didn't match the distance from her building to home. A hotel hold that cleared before I could look too closely at it. I saw them. I registered them. Then I did what people do when they want peace more than truth. I let them go, because the house still sounded like home. Because she still laughed at the right moments. Because our friends still treated us like a unit. Because the photos on the wall didn't rearrange themselves. Everything looked normal, the way a document looks normal until you compare it to the ledger. And I didn't compare it. Not until 11:12 p.m. in a Portland hotel room, when someone else did it for me. I didn't watch the video again that night. I waited until morning, until the adrenaline had burned off and the room felt neutral again. At 6:40 a.m., after a shower that did nothing and coffee that tasted like paper, I sat at the small hotel desk and opened the file with the same detachment I use when reviewing evidence I didn't personally collect. This time, I watched it all. I noticed things I missed the first 5 seconds. The way the lamp on my side of the bed was turned off, but hers was on. The crease in the sheets where I usually slept, undisturbed. The angle of the camera confirming it hadn't been moved recently. The timestamp embedded in the metadata, precise to the second. There was no sound from the house except what the microphone picked up. No television. No music. Just familiarity being used without me. When it ended, I didn't feel anger. I felt alignment. Dates started arranging themselves in my head. My Chicago trip in March. Her team dinner that ran late. The Denver conference I extended by a day because of weather. Her sudden enthusiasm for weekend plans I wasn't invited to. It wasn't that the memories hurt. It was that they finally made sense. I pulled up our shared calendar. Then my travel records. Then her location history, which she'd never bothered to disable because she'd never thought she'd need to. Patterns emerged quickly. Too quickly to be accidental. Then there were the finances. I logged into our joint account and scrolled back 6 months. I didn't search for big numbers. Big numbers draw attention. I looked for repetition instead. Similar amounts, similar times of day, similar vendors. Restaurants that didn't match our habits. Rideshare charges clustered around evenings I was out of town. A boutique hotel hold that appeared, disappeared, then appeared again a month later. It wasn't chaos. It was structure. I checked the smart home system next. Door access logs. Motion triggers. Camera uptime. The bedroom camera had been accessed remotely twice in the last month, both times from an IP address that wasn't mine. That meant someone else had credentials, or Lily had shared them. Either way, it meant intent. I still didn't confront her. Not because I was afraid of the conversation, but because conversations distort facts. People cry. People confess selectively. People say things they later deny. Evidence doesn't do that. So I stopped calling it coincidence. That internal shift was subtle but final. I wasn't a husband trying to understand his marriage anymore. I was an observer documenting a system. Every new detail went into its place without emotion attached. I made notes, screenshots, copies. Not because I planned to use them immediately, but because reality has a way of changing shape when left undocumented. By the time my flight boarded, I wasn't thinking about betrayal. I was thinking about sequence, cause and effect. What moved first and what followed. The video hadn't broken anything. It had clarified it. And clarity, once established, doesn't reverse. I sent one message that morning, and only one. I replied to the unknown number with 2 words. Got it. No punctuation. No questions. No follow-up. Whatever satisfaction the sender expected, I didn't give it to them. I wasn't interested in their motives. I already had the information I needed. Then I texted Lily. I told her the conference had run long, that I wasn't feeling well, and that I might extend my trip by a day or 2. I said it casually, the same tone I'd used dozens of times before. She responded quickly. Too quickly. Sympathy, concern, a heart emoji that felt like a reflex more than a feeling. I thanked her and put the phone away. That was the moment something separated inside me. Not dramatically, not with anger. It felt more like a system shutting down unnecessary processes. The part of me that wanted explanations went quiet. The part that wanted reassurance never came online at all. I didn't confront her because confrontation assumes the relationship is still a shared space. It wasn't. Whatever Lily and I had agreed to, implicitly or otherwise, she'd already exited it. Talking would only create noise where silence gave me leverage. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. Instead, I decided on 3 rules. No accusations. No emotional displays. No deviation from routine unless it served a purpose. I ate room service dinner alone and organized my notes for the flight home. I slept. Not well, but enough. In the morning, I reviewed the video again, not for content, but for context. Camera ID, firmware version, access path. I drafted a quiet request to the smart home provider asking for a full access log export under the guise of a security audit. I wasn't angry at Lily. Anger requires engagement. I felt something colder and more useful, certainty. On the flight back, I watched other passengers talk, laugh, argue over armrests. Ordinary chaos. I imagined Lily at home, moving through the house as if nothing had changed, using my coffee mug, feeding the plants, sleeping in the bed we bought together because it felt solid. I let her. Letting her believe I was unsteady was part of the decision. People reveal more when they think they've already won. They get careless. They relax. They make mistakes. By the time the plane touched down, the outcome no longer felt hypothetical. It felt scheduled. I didn't know the exact date yet, but I knew the direction. I wasn't going to ask her why. I wasn't going to demand honesty. I wasn't going to compete with someone who thought secrecy was a strategy. I would move differently, quietly, precisely. And when the structure finally failed, it would be under the weight of its own lies, not my reaction. For the next several days, I did nothing visible. That was the point. I went to work, answered emails, joined calls, and returned home on schedule. I asked Lily about her day. I nodded in the right places. I touched her shoulder once in passing, not affectionately, just familiarly, to see if she'd flinch. She didn't. Comfort is its own kind of confession. Behind the scenes, I watched. The access logs came back first. Clean, time-stamped, complete. The bedroom camera had recorded motion on nights I was out of state, always within the same window of time. The door logs confirmed entries that matched rideshare drop-offs. No alarms triggered. No forced access. Everything consensual, routine, repeatable. I hired a private investigator the way I hire expert witnesses, quietly, through referrals, with defined scope. His report didn't arrive with drama. It arrived with names, addresses, and documentation. The man's name was Noah Reed, early 40s, co-owner of a small creative studio registered under relatives' names. Clean record. Predictable habits. Predictable weaknesses. I didn't interfere. I let Lily continue her routines. I let a few transactions clear that I could have frozen. I let a hotel charge post instead of disputing it. Facts matter more when they're complete. Interrupting a pattern only teaches people to hide it better. The investigator confirmed overlap between Noah's studio schedule and Lily's late work nights. Surveillance photos showed nothing explicit, just consistency. The same parking structure, the same entrance, the same casual familiarity that only forms over time. Waiting created its own tension, not anxiety, focus. Every day that passed added weight to the record. Every unchallenged lie made the eventual truth heavier. I noticed how Lily relaxed, how she stopped checking her phone so often, how she assumed my silence meant weakness instead of recalibration. People misread quiet all the time. They think it's absence when it's actually presence without performance. I didn't correct her. At night, I reviewed documents. I organized files. I labeled folders with dates instead of descriptions. I wasn't building a case for court yet. I was building a timeline that couldn't be argued with. The strange part was how ordinary everything felt. The betrayal didn't escalate. It stabilized. And in that stability, it became easier to see it for what it was, a system running as designed. I wasn't angry because anger would have required me to believe this was sudden. It wasn't. It was maintained. And maintenance leaves records. So I kept watching. Because the longer something operates without resistance, the more it reveals about itself. What happened next didn't require me to intervene directly. It unfolded through systems already in place, the same way structural failures do once weight shifts and nobody compensates for it. I didn't escalate anything. I initiated process. I requested a routine review of our lease documents, citing a clerical discrepancy. I flagged an insurance clarification related to shared liability exposure. I authorized a financial audit connected to the studio Noah co-owned, using channels that didn't include my name beyond what was legally required. Everything was ordinary. Everything was defensible. To anyone on the receiving end, it looked like inconvenience. A landlord asking questions. An insurer requesting verification. A financial institution conducting due diligence. No accusations. No insinuations. Just paperwork arriving at the wrong time. I watched the effects ripple outward. Noah's studio began missing deadlines. His partners, family on paper, investors in practice, started asking questions he couldn't easily answer. Banking requests stalled. Payments froze pending review. None of it dramatic enough to alarm the public, but enough to strain internal trust. At home, Lily grew restless. Not anxious, irritated. She complained about minor obstacles. A delay. A change in plans. She didn't know why things felt harder. She just felt the resistance. I didn't connect the dots for her. I stayed consistent. I left for work at the same time. I came home when expected. I didn't check her phone. I didn't ask where she'd been. The absence of confrontation created a vacuum she kept trying to fill with explanations I hadn't requested. From my perspective, it was no longer personal. It was procedural. Systems fail when they're forced to operate outside their assumptions. Noah's assumed discretion. Lily's assumed privacy. Neither had accounted for scrutiny that didn't announce itself. The audit requests multiplied. Routine, independent, uncoordinated on the surface. Together, they formed pressure. Not enough to crush. Enough to expose. I didn't celebrate it. I barely reacted at all. Because once things move beyond the personal, they stop being about emotion and start being about inevitability. Nobody was being punished. Nobody was being targeted. Processes were simply doing what they do when information surfaces. To them, it probably felt like bad luck. To me, it felt like alignment. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd just stopped protecting it. And without protection, the structure behaved exactly as it was built to. I came back to Denver on a Thursday evening, earlier than Lily expected. I didn't announce it. I parked in the driveway, walked into the house, and set my bag down where it always went. The house sounded the same. Refrigerator hum. HVAC cycling. Nothing about it warned her. She came into the living room 20 minutes later, already talking, words spilling ahead of thought. She said my name twice before I answered. Her voice was tight, overbright, like someone trying to outrun silence. "You should have told me you were back," she said. "I've been trying to reach you. There's been a lot going on." I sat down instead of responding. That seemed to unsettle her more than any accusation would have. She talked for several minutes without interruption. About work stress. About how things felt off lately. About misunderstandings she couldn't quite define. She cried briefly, then stopped, then got angry at the lack of response, then softened again. It was a performance built for resistance, and there wasn't any. When she finally stopped, she waited. I let the quiet stretch until it changed the room. "I filed," I said. She blinked. "Filed what?" "The paperwork," I said. "It's already in motion." Her expression shifted in stages. Confusion first, then calculation, then panic. She asked questions quickly, too quickly, as if speed could reverse sequence. When did I decide? Who knew? What did I think I knew? I answered none of that. I told her only what mattered. There would be no confrontation, no negotiation over reality, no debate about intent. The process would move forward. She could cooperate or not. The outcome would adjust accordingly. Her tone changed when she realized persuasion wasn't working. Anger sharpened her words. She accused me of coldness, of cruelty, of planning behind her back. When that didn't move me, she tried pleading. Promises. Explanations offered too late to be relevant. I didn't argue. Arguments require belief in reversal. I stood up when the conversation stopped producing sound. I told her where she could find the documents. I told her I'd moved my personal accounts already. I told her the house would remain functional until arrangements were finalized. She asked if I ever loved her. I didn't answer that either. Because love wasn't the subject anymore. Structure was. When I left the room, I felt lighter, not because I'd won anything, but because the roles had shifted cleanly. I wasn't reacting. I was proceeding. And she could feel it. That was the moment she understood she wasn't speaking to the same person she'd been lying to. After that night, I didn't drive the process forward. I answered emails when asked. I signed where signatures were required. The rest moved on its own momentum, guided by documentation rather than intention. That's how systems prefer to work once they're engaged. Digital forensics came back first. Independent confirmation of the video's origin, integrity, and access history. The file hadn't been altered. The timestamps matched the access logs. The camera authentication tied back to credentials Lily had shared. There was nothing subjective about it. It wasn't a story. It was a record. Financial reviews followed a similar path. Transactions were flagged, then categorized, then contextualized. Charges that had once looked small became relevant when grouped together. The pattern was obvious once presented cleanly. No emotion attached, just arithmetic. At the studio, the pressure reached a point where it could no longer be managed quietly. Partners stopped returning calls. Vendors demanded clarification. An audit expanded. What had once been flexible suddenly required explanation. I didn't attend any of it. I read summaries afterward. Noah's partnership collapsed without drama. Disagreements turned procedural. Control shifted. Authority dissolved. People who had once protected him stepped back when protection became liability. That's how distance works when incentives change. Lily tried to reach me during that period, less frequently than before, but with more urgency. Her messages alternated between anger and exhaustion. She wanted clarity. She wanted reassurance. She wanted something solid to push against. I didn't provide it, because nothing had changed since the conversation. The direction was set. Everything else was just movement along the path. Court decisions came down quietly. Motions approved. Timelines set. Requests answered. I didn't argue because there was nothing to argue. I responded when required and stayed silent when silence was sufficient. People around us began to notice the absence before they noticed the reason. Invitations stopped including both names. Questions were asked indirectly. I let them remain unanswered. Outcomes speak more clearly than explanations. When it was over, there was no final scene. No confrontation. No last message that needed to be reread. Just notifications confirming completion. I closed the files and archived them the way I always do. Labeled. Stored. Done. Because when something ends properly, it doesn't demand attention afterward. It just stops. When it was finished, there wasn't a moment that felt like victory. There was no rush of relief, no surge of satisfaction. What settled in instead was quiet, the kind that isn't empty, just unoccupied. Like a room after furniture has been removed and the echo finally fades. I kept the house, not because it mattered symbolically, but because it made logistical sense. The mortgage was stable. The location worked. Changing everything at once would have been unnecessary disruption, and I had already absorbed enough change to last a lifetime. Lily took what she was entitled to. Nothing more, nothing less. The numbers closed cleanly. The marriage didn't. People asked, carefully at first, then more directly. Mutual friends. Colleagues who thought they were being discreet. Even family members who wanted a narrative they could hold on to. I didn't give them one. I didn't explain. I didn't correct assumptions. Silence allowed everyone to project what they needed without involving me. Lily tried once more, weeks after the final documents were signed. A message asking if we could talk, just to clear the air. I read it twice and archived it. There was no air left to clear. Everything had already settled. The strange thing was how quickly the world adjusted. Neighbors waved the same way they always had. Work continued. Bills arrived and were paid. The systems that had carried us as a couple adapted easily to carrying one person instead. That adaptability made the whole thing feel smaller, more contained. I didn't miss the arguments because there hadn't been many. I didn't miss the affection either, once I realized how long it had been conditional. What I noticed most was the absence of vigilance. I no longer tracked tone or timing. I no longer wondered where someone was or why a phone buzzed at midnight. That absence created space. I didn't fill it immediately. I let the house remain quiet. I ate simple meals. I slept without checking the time. I worked. I exercised. I stopped narrating my own life in my head. There was no need to prove anything. The outcomes existed independently of explanation. Lily's life reorganized itself without my input. Noah disappeared from relevance entirely. Their consequences weren't my responsibility, and recognizing that felt like setting something heavy down after carrying it too far. I didn't feel bitterness because bitterness requires revisiting. I didn't feel grief because grief implies something unresolved. What I felt was completion, not happiness, not sadness, just the steady understanding that something had ended exactly when it should have, and that nothing needed to replace it immediately. The house stayed quiet, and for the first time in a long while, that quiet felt stable. A year later, I was standing in a bookstore downtown, killing time before a meeting that didn't need preparation. I was in the history section, reading the inside flap of something I wouldn't buy, when a woman next to me commented on the author's tendency to overstate conclusions. Her tone was calm, observational, not performative. Her name was Mia. We talked for 10 minutes about nothing important. Books. Work. the layout of the store. She didn't ask questions that felt like tests. She didn't overshare. When we exchanged numbers, it felt optional, not charged. That was new. We went for coffee a week later. Then dinner. Then silence between messages that didn't need explanation. There were no surprises. No hidden devices. No careful phrasing. What she said matched what she did. I didn't tell her the full story. I didn't need to. The past no longer required translation. Sometimes I think about that notification in Portland. About how a stranger decided to involve themselves in my life for reasons that didn't matter. One late-night message, sent without context or permission, rewrote my direction completely. Not because of the betrayal, because of what followed when I stopped resisting clarity. Life didn't end. It recalibrated. And I didn't continue the same way. I continued cleaner.